Hey there, welcome back to Finance Friday. It's another special edition of Money Girl where I answer your burning money questions. Today's topic comes from Yanni, who says, my husband recently retired at age 60, but I'm still working and plan to retire in about 6 years. Since my income covers our expenses, my husband doesn't need to take distributions from his 401k and will delay his Social Security benefits. We have about 1 year's worth of income in high-yield savings. Do you think that's a good amount? Now that we live on a single income, we qualify for Roth IRAs. So should we invest extra money in a brokerage, a traditional IRA, or a Roth IRA? Yanni, thank you so much for your questions. It sounds like your finances are in great shape. This podcast will answer your questions about navigating saving and investing as you approach retirement or maybe have less income with a newly retired partner or spouse. Welcome back, everyone. It's episode 937 of Money Girl. I really appreciate you spending time with me. I'm Laura Adams, an award-winning author, a spokesperson, money speaker, and founder of The Money Stack. That's my Substack newsletter. You can learn more, ask your money questions, and sign up for The Money Stack when you visit lauradadams.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter for free or support the show as a paid member and also get access to live educational events. So if you're a Money Girl reader or podcast listener, you definitely know that I recommend building a healthy emergency fund. A cash reserve is essential for staying safe if your income drops or you have some unexpected expenses. But the right amount of emergency money is different for everyone. For instance, if you're single and you have no dependents and a pretty stable job, you may only need savings equal to a month or two of your living expenses. However, if you've got a large family with lots of expenses and you're the sole breadwinner, you likely need savings of at least 6 months' worth of your living expenses. But what if you're like Yanni and you've got a retired spouse and you plan to step away from the workforce in just a few years? She said in 6 years. When you have less income or you expect to live on a fixed income, it's typically a good idea to maintain a larger emergency fund. Since Yanni has a year's worth of her and her husband's expenses in a high-yield savings account, that's likely enough for her current stage of life. I recommend that she keep the funds in an FDIC or an NCUA insured account if it isn't already in one. FDIC is at typical banks and NCUA is the insurance you get at credit unions. Yanni didn't mention how much she earns or their annual expenses, but if her savings exceed $250,000, she should spread out the funds into accounts at different insured institutions. That's because the FDIC and NCUA insurance covers you for up to $250,000 per insured bank or credit union. So again, if you have more than that in any one institution, amounts above that $250,000 limit are at risk. So the solution is simply spreading them out in different institutions. As Yanni approaches retirement, she may want to boost her emergency fund to more than a year's worth of expenses, perhaps up to 18 months or even 2 years. However, the amount of savings you need in retirement depends on your sources of guaranteed income. For instance, if you get paid a monthly pension or you're claiming Social Security retirement benefits, you may rely less on your investments for income. Let's say you're retired and have a significant unexpected expense. Maybe it's some necessary home repair or maybe some unreimbursed medical care that you have to get. If you already have a relatively large guaranteed monthly income, you may not need to tap your investments to cover it. But if you rely on distributions from your retirement investments for income, having a sufficient cash buffer gives you more flexibility. Suppose the markets and the value of your investments happen to be significantly down. That would be a very bad time to liquidate some of those assets to pay for a home repair or for any other reason you might, need to tap that account. A better strategy would be to withdraw funds from your emergency fund to cover needed expenses and allow your investments some time to recover. Selling off investments that are down means taking a loss and having to sell more shares because they're temporarily worth less. That means you're going to have fewer shares. Your investments will be worth less when prices do bounce back. You'll have a much smaller nest egg going forward. So having quick access to cash helps you avoid selling investments at a loss. Plus, you won't have the stress of liquidating your nest egg at the wrong time if you find yourself in a financial pinch. Keeping a healthy emergency fund also allows you to pay for something special, like, maybe you want to go on a once-in-a-lifetime trip or make a gift to a family member. You can do that without unnecessarily depleting your retirement savings or having to incur any debt. To sum up, the more you depend on retirement account distributions for income, the larger your emergency fund in retirement should be. It can be a valuable resource for avoiding debt or selling investments when the market is down. But there is a downside to keeping too much in savings. The problem is that it likely won't keep pace with inflation, which has historically been about 3%. Having investments that yield a higher return is your best defense against inflation eroding your purchasing power over time. So there's definitely a balance you have to strike between holding the right amount of emergency savings and investments. Pre-retirees and retirees need safety, but they also need to keep the majority of their portfolio growing to beat inflation and provide a lifetime income. Yanni, you're doing great right now, but you may want to consider slowly building your emergency savings so that you've got an even larger cash cushion by the time you and your husband are both fully retired. So I mentioned that most retirees should keep a good portion of their retirement funds growing. That's because you might need income for several decades if you're in your early 60s and remain in relatively good health. Approximately 1/3 of today's 65-year-olds will live until at least age 90, and 1 in 7 will reach the age of 95. So today's longer life expectancies and higher cost of living mean that your current income may not be sufficient in the future. With an average inflation rate of 3%, your living cost today could double in less than 25 years. In addition, if your health takes a turn for the worse, you may need to move into an assisted living facility or hire in-home care, which can be quite expensive. Yanni asked about how to invest extra money during the transitional period when her husband is retired and she's still working. Since she has earned income, I recommend maximizing every possible tax-advantaged retirement account. Now, Yanni didn't mention having a workplace retirement plan, but that's the first account that I would use when possible. So Yanni, if you do have a retirement account at work, I'm going to recommend that you maximize that. But she may not, and that's okay. Since Yanni's husband is retired and without any earned income, he's not eligible to make an IRA contribution. However, Yanni can contribute on his behalf because she does have earned income. That's known as a spousal IRA. For instance, if Yanni's over 50, she can contribute $8,000 to her Roth IRA and $8,000 to her spouse's Roth IRA for a total contribution of $16,000. Those are the limits in 2025. Yanni didn't mention how much of her and her husband's portfolio is in Roth and traditional tax-deferred accounts, but increasing their Roth balances will provide them with more tax-free income in retirement, which is something I always recommend. So Yanni, I definitely recommend using those Roth IRA accounts. Then, if you've got more than $16,000 to invest, I would put it in a taxable brokerage account. So again, maximizing those tax-advantaged accounts first and any Roth accounts first is typically best, especially if you don't have much money already in Roth accounts. As you approach and enter retirement, focus on building a diversified portfolio, just as what's recommended for all investors. However, you can adjust your allocation to minimize risk. For example, you can own fewer stocks and stock funds and more income-producing assets, such as bonds, bond funds, and money markets. If you only own stock or stock funds, your nest egg will have higher returns, but experience higher volatility, which most retirees want to avoid. But if you only own bonds or bond funds, you'll have more stability but lower returns. So there's a nice mix that you need to establish as you approach retirement. Yanni, thank you so much for your questions. If you create a portfolio that combines growth and income to beat inflation, give you enough income for a long life, and doesn't exceed your risk tolerance, you'll set yourself up for a very comfortable retirement. Before we go, a quick reminder to subscribe to The Money Stack, my Substack newsletter, when you visit lauradadams.com. It's filled with money tips, tools, news, challenges, and things I enjoy. You can subscribe for free or become a paid member with access to live educational events. That's all for now. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, here's to living a richer life. Money Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast, and I want to thank our amazing team. Steve Rickyberg audio engineers the show. Holly Hutchins is our director of podcast. Morgan Christensen is our advertising operations specialist, and Nathaniel Hoops is our marketing contractor.